All right, vetters, Dr. Steven Greer is back in a brand new interview on the Danny Jones podcast, calling out Dr. Garry Nolan, Stanford professor Dr. Garry Nolan. Now, it all goes back to these little beings right here in, I think, 2012 when Dr. Garry Nolan was asked by Dr. Steven Greer and his team to take a look at these little beings here and determine, what they are. Well, then, chaos ensues. So let's hear Dr. Steven Greer explain kind of what happened. And again, he calls out Dr. Garry Nolan pretty hard here, saying he's basically paid off. He even goes on to, say, quote, academic fraud was, performed, I guess, by Dr. Garry Nolan in the analysis of these beings, right? So basically what Dr. Garry Nolan released about these little beings, right, Steven Greer calls out as academic fraud, a hoax, right? These are the words he's using. I mean, he comes out hard against Garry Nolan. So let's take a look.
How far have you gotten in your investigation into those beings that you talked about and studied in your Sirius documentary? The small beings, and I think you talked about Garry Nolan worked with you on that.
Yeah, Garry Nolan received a lot of money right after we gave him that genetic sample, and he altered the results of it. So we don't know what that creature is.
He received a lot of money?
Yeah. I think it was $3.4 million from the Pentagon. And then he is now contracting with the intelligence community to show UAP injuries, which is just a psyop.
It's a psyop.
Yes, of course. I mean, the UAP injuries are all man-made. But of course, you get someone like him.
It's the man-made reverse engineered?
Of course. And of course, you put this the stink on the ETs when it's something we've done, right? So unfortunately, I think that went sideways very badly. So to this day, we don't know what that thing was. Now, he published a report saying it was a deformed fetus,
yes,
even though the top geneticist or doctor who deals with bone malformations said no way, because it was global. It had growth plates, consistent, equivalent of a 6-year-old human, but it was only about 6 inches tall. And so we don't know what it was. It could have been something that is a completely unknown species on Earth. It could have been something that's a result of both Earth and non-human interactions that are ancient in that part of the Atacama Desert in Chile.
Yeah.
There are accounts of these UFOs being seen and these small creatures. The adult ones are like 1.5 feet tall. But to this day, we actually don't know what it is. I mean, I never said it was ET. I said we don't know what it is, but it's most certainly not human. So what was published by Garry Nolan and those guys, and I've had the top geneticists in the world tear apart their data, says it's totally hoaxed. It's totally academic fraud.
Really?
So, yes. But this happened. This is why you asked about being paranoid. I'm careful, but I'm not paranoid because I've had so many people who could go on the path of finding the truth, and they either get blackmailed and or both bribed, given a lot of money, and next thing you know, everything goes sideways. And so, I've seen that hundreds of times in 35 years. So, it makes you a little bit cynical, I guess, or skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, he completely started out as an honest person. I know that. And when we first met in 2012, I think. But at this point, man, that's got to be cleaned up. It's a mess.
Yikes. I mean, Dr. Steven Greer is going hard after Dr. Garry Nolan, right? Yeah, he is making some, extraordinary claims against him. And I guess to some ways, like trying to understand Dr. Steven Greer's, mentality, right? So he releases a documentary called Sirius, right? And it's all about these little figures. So for Dr. Garry Nolan to sort of take the wind out of those sails is kind of, what Dr. Steven Greer may be upset about, because in his mind, he putting all his eggs in one basket on this, right? Like there's something here. And then Dr. Garry Nolan just be like, nah, it's nothing. It's just human. Weird, but human. And Steven Greer clearly is not okay with that. But let's be real. Why wouldn't you be? Like, that's still a cool documentary. You found this thing, it gets studied, and then the conclusion is it's just human, but it's still strange. It's like, that's okay. It's still like exciting. It doesn't need to remain so mysterious and be non-human. Like, that's okay to do that, to go find the truth about something, right? It's still exciting. Like, I just don't get it, why some of these explanations don't get accepted, Now, let's take a look at a clip from the Sirius documentary where Dr. Garry Nolan is featured, right, in the documentary. Now, clearly, after all of this, it changes, but, maybe this is why Dr. Steven Greer is mad, right? Because in the documentary, Dr. Garry Nolan says one thing. Now, granted, he's in charge of the editing, so who knows? But clearly, afterwards, the story changed. But this is what Dr. Garry Nolan said as it was featured in the Sirius documentary.
Great view of the eye socket. Very different eye socket. And that's another thing that the scientists who've looked at this at Stanford have commented on. If you look at this creature and you look at the cranial vault, how large it is, the size from the eyes up is at least 3 times that of a human.
One of the first things that Dr. Lockman immediately remarked upon was the shape of the head and the skull. It was not something that he is accustomed to seeing, and it was quite interesting and in some ways exciting that the associated features that you would expect from a syndrome of that nature were not found. This specimen does not fall under any known, to me, class of disorders or syndromes. In many respects, the proportions of the spine and extremities are normal. The major abnormalities appear to be 1, the size of the specimen, mid-face hypoplasia and underdevelopment of the jaw, and that the specimen has only 10 ribs. Humans normally have 12, rarely 11. One of the most remarkable aspects of this is when we came down to study the actual bone density. One of the features of fetuses that specialists looks at is the so-called growth plates of the epiphyseal joint, say, of the knees. The shock, I think, and the surprise was, and the absolute certainty that Dr. Lockman had was that this specimen is between the age of 6 to 8 years old. The shock was that this specimen was clearly not fetal. How do you explain how something 6 inches tall survived to any length of time that would allow for it to survive 100 or 1,000 years ago?
And look, I found a clip of Dr. Garry Nolan talking about this on Lex Friedman's podcast. So I want to give Dr. Garry Nolan a chance here to respond, right, to what Dr. Steven Greer is saying. But here's kind of Dr. Garry Nolan's version of events, Here's what he has to say of what exactly happened.
Steven Greer claimed that a skeleton discovered in Atacama region of Chile might be an alien. You reached out to him and took on the task of proving or disproving that with the rigor of science. The result is a paper titled Whole Genome Sequencing of Atacama Skeletons Shows Novel Mutations Linked with Dysplasia. Can you tell this full story?
The story was, as you put it right there, correct. Reached out, got a sample of the body, did the DNA sequencing, then worked with a team of 2 other Stanford scientists and Roche sequencing group, Roche Diagnostics, and probably a total team of about 11 or so people. And as is standard in these kinds of things, the professors actually don't do the work. The students do the work and figured out the answer. And then we help them put together the story. And the story was simply that it was human, 100%. I went into it thinking it was originally a monkey of some sort. I got kind of excited a few months into the process thinking, well, what happens if it is an alien? right?
Can you describe some of the characteristics of the skeleton that make it unique and interesting?
Primarily, it had dysmorphias of the brain. And so the first thing I did, actually, when I got pictures of it, I took it to a local expert at Stanford, and he was on the paper. And he was the world expert in pediatric bone dysmorphias. He literally wrote the book and on this, because that's what you do. You go to an expert when it's outside of your field of interest. And he said, well, I haven't seen this particular collection of mutations before, or this physiology before, but here's what I think it might be. And he said, but based on the size of the thing and the bone density, it would appear to be like 6 or 7 years old. Now, again, that's the thing where I think the lay public doesn't understand, or takes a speculation like that and turns it into a fact. No one ever said that it was that age. We only said that the bones made it look like it was that age. Mm-hmm. But then we went back and looked for genetic explanations of why things might look the way they did. And if you, again, read the paper, it's very carefully caveated to say that these mutations might result in this. But what we did find was an unexpectedly large number of mutations associated with bone growth in this individual. And it was just a bad roll of the dice, right? You roll the dice enough times with enough people born every year, and someone will roll the wrong dice all at once. So the sad part about it was individuals in the UFO community who wanted to think that there was some sort of conspiracy around it, right? That somebody had somehow convinced all of my students to lie.
Right.
I mean, come on. You know, I would lose my job, first of all, and they would all be, in trouble forever. Let's go back to the Atacama case that I was debunking it. Well, debunking is a loaded term. It sort of assumes that you were going in purposefully to prove something is wrong. I wasn't. I was just going in to collect the data. And, I showed that this one was human. There was another skull that somebody had at one point. It was called the Star Child. They called it the Star Child skull. I said, I looked at it. I looked at the DNA sequencing that they had done. I said, this is human. End of story. The people who owned the thing at the time disagreed with me. And then eventually another group came in and proved that I was right. And it's not about debunking. It's about getting the more spectacular and hyped cases off the table. I mean, the reason I got interested in it is because somebody was hyping it. Mm-hmm. And not because I wanted to disprove it, but because I just wanted to know. Mm-hmm. And thus get it off the table, because it's usually the most extravagant things that are most likely to be wrong. Somewhere in the rubble will be something interesting.
So there you go. You got Garry Nolan giving his, explanation of events of what happened, and clearly he wouldn't want to risk his job, his profession, his career on hoaxing something or, whatever. But it's these allegations, right, from Dr. Steven Greer. And he seems so certain because Dr. Garry Nolan got some funding, he's now paid off. And he can't trust anything he said. Look what he did to us on the Sirius documentary, academic fraud, hoax. I mean, these are strong allegations, right? With zero proof. Just zero proof, right? Even if he said, we had doctors look at this and that, and they said it was something different. That's just different of opinions. I mean, we do that with doctors all the time, right? You get a second opinion. But he goes so far as to say that these other people that he had looked at it, they looked at the results of Dr. Garry Nolan's analysis and determined that was academic fraud or he hoaxed it. How do you do that? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence of that? Where's the show that, right? How did these guys come to that conclusion? And are they willing to go on camera and say, Dr. Garry Nolan, right? Because, these are just huge, huge allegations against Dr. Garry Nolan with zero proof, right? And I wanted to show you in this video Dr. Garry Nolan's version of events too. So you can decide for yourself. I think I know where I stand with this. And, again, I don't know why Dr. Steven Greer does this stuff. He comes out against so many people and says some things that, because I like listening to his interviews, right? But sometimes he just says things like this. I'm just like, what? So anyway, you got to see it for yourself. Make up your own mind. We'll see you guys in the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.